Hello, everyone. Welcome to an evening of readings with Jamel Brinkley, Clifford Thompson, and Danez Smith. I am Keisha Lee, Executive Director at the Hurston Wright Foundation. And we are a literary arts organization dedicated to discovering, mentoring, and honoring Black writers. Today is Juneteenth, and if we were gathered in person, I might imagine that we would have song, libations, and a celebration. This public reading also kicks off Hurston Wright Virtual Writers Weekend, where we welcome 26 Black writers from all around the country. And we're entering our second decade of these writing workshops, which we typically hold in person at Howard University. If this year has taught us anything, Black writers must write. We need Black writers to document our joys, our resistance, and tell the truths of our movements. Before we get started, I'd like for you in the chat box, please share one or two words, an offering in honor of both the ancestors, because without them, we would not have the space to gather and celebrate today. And also encouragement for our writers who, with their talents and their gifts and their vision, are critical critical in order to keep steed towards our Black culture, our Black history, and this Black moment and world moment that we're experiencing. And my offering up today is really for just joy and love. I think as Black people, we need to count all the joys and all the celebrations we can amongst everything. So I see you. Thank you for being here. And I see everyone from Alabama and Louisiana and Florida. I know we have folks from the Caribbean. Thank you all for joining. So listen, I have an invitation for you all. One invitation is to click the green button. There's one thing to say that we support Black writers and also to honor our ancestors. It's another thing to do that with deeds. If you click the green button, you'll be transported to mahoganybooks.com, which is a local Black-owned bookstore here in Washington, D.C., and one of our partners for our public reading series. You'll be able to buy books from Cliff, Danez, and Jamel. The other offering I have for you before we get started is to visit our website or visit our page here on Crowdcast. We have a series of amazing events, another public reading in July and August, in addition to a series of micro classes for those of you who are writers or curious about exploring and expanding your craft. We would love to welcome you there. And in addition to that, my last offering is really just to enjoy tonight. Thank you for bringing deep gratitude and joy. Thank you for bringing resistance as well, Zara. Barbara, thank you for your peace and power. Chantel, your abundance and grounding. We need it all. Yes, we need these words, Barbara. Imagination and community. Thank you, Danielle. Balance and solace. That's one of my favorite words. We all need comfort right now, and we all must be comforting each other. Creativity, joy, blessings, steady heartbeat. And with that, y'all, I am very excited for tonight's public reading. If you have questions throughout the actual public reading, please put them in the Ask a Question box. And you'll see it right below. You'll see it right below the call to action where it says by Cliff and Danez and Jamel's books. So please put your questions there and not in the chat box. And if you guys will hold on one second, we're going to go live. We're going to go in this order. Jamel will share first, Cliff will share second, and Danez will share last. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. And then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. Okay. So thank you, everyone. Have an enjoyable public reading session. I look forward to seeing you on the other side for the Q&A.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jamel Brinkley. I want to say thank you to the Hurston Wright Foundation, to Mahogany Books, to all of you for gathering with us on Juneteenth. It's my honor to read with Cliff and Danez. I'm going to read from a news story that's coming out next month, just the first few pages. It's called Comfort. It is May, or it is June, or July, or August. Or maybe it isn't Simone's most hated time of year. Maybe it's just that the days feel long and that they burn. The sensation of being trapped in an oven. She sleeps for 1 or 2 hours at a time at most before waking up. It could be the weed she smoked earlier that makes her anxious she's being watched or has heard a strange sound. The remedies she keeps using for her insomnia fail again and all at once. The dabs of lavender oil on her wrists and temples irritate, prickling and raising bumps on her skin. The glasses of wine give her headaches. The silk eye mask causes her to sweat, and in the total darkness she panics, so she takes it off. What is that sound? There's a man sleeping next to her, but he's breathing peacefully, silently. She goes out to the living room where she's left her phone and brings it back to the bedroom. Over and over again throughout the night, since she can't help herself, she stares at the screen. When she puts the phone down, she imagines. Sometimes she manages to sleep again and dream. Later during the day, she won't be able to tell the difference, but this is what she often sees. James Brown is there in her room, wearing tight slacks and a newsboy cap. But he is her father and she is a little girl. And he, the James Brown who is her father, does dances that she, the Simone who is a grown woman, has seen in a video featuring the actual James Brown. He calls out the names of the steps to girl Simone as he does them. The funky chicken, the mashed potato, the camel walk, the robot, the soul train. He grunts and goads himself on, his shoes tapping and shuffling along her hardwood floor. At one point during the mashed potato, he drops to his knees and bounces immediately, incredibly, back up to his feet. The thump this drop causes, along with the grunting and goading and tapping and shuffling, frightens Simone, even though his smile during the performance suggests he intends to entertain her, reassure her. When he's done, he sees that she's afraid, and his smile becomes strange, a rictus, scaring her even more. Through his teeth, he says he'll come back later, soon, and then he leaves, not through the bedroom door, but through the back window. Drinking usually made her older brother Marcus want to dance. While he sipped, he liked to talk about animals. They just do things better, he'd say. I mean, fish breathe underwater. Think about that. Have you ever really thought about that? Cows have 4 stomachs. Do you know what I would do with 4 stomachs? Nobody would mess with me. I would be a mammoth. I'd be the biggest man in the world. Then at some point he would set down his liquor and say, "Oh, I'm feeling right." He'd tell her to turn up the music she had chosen for him. He liked hip hop, funk, and soul. Then he would stand and start to move, alternating between seriousness and self-mockery. "Watch out, ladies," he would say, holding the hips of an imaginary woman while he rocked his own hips side to side, forward and back. Simone would laugh and call him a fool. "Marcus, you're a fool," she thinks now. She can almost see her brother there, dancing in front of her, smiling and hyping himself up. I'm about to make you an auntie, Cece, he'd say. What you want, a niece or a nephew? He would carry on this way, like some sort of real deal player, even though he rarely went out or tried to meet women. He would say he wanted to get himself together first, get a better job, a better place to live, grow into the version of himself he really wanted to become. It is May or June or July or August, or maybe it isn't, but the sun rises or seems to very early, always much sooner than Simone wants, heating the stoop she uses only as a seat. These days she never sits there, however. When she used to, it was with Marcus, when he was still alive. They would talk about a time when neither of them would be living check to check, when they would save enough money to buy an apartment or even a house on a street she could clearly imagine. Now, because of the civil lawsuit, Simone and her parents actually have enough to buy some property. But for each of them, the notion of spending the money seems impossible, like eating a bowl of ash. Holding on to it feels like one way of coping with loss. Trading it all away for something else feels like a loss twice over. When the alarm on the man's phone begins to chime, Simone sits bolt upright. Her head throbs. For a moment, she doesn't recall which of her three men is beside her. He didn't wake up when her stomach growled and when she went to the bathroom to vomit, and his alarm doesn't wake him now. She goes to the other side of the bed and silences it. The man is naked on top of the sheets, his shoulders and arms muscular, his midsection round, his legs skinny and toes oddly long. She remembers drinking with him in the living room while the rest of the night is fuzzy, and while the rest of the night is fuzzy, she remembers a few other things too. He complained playfully when she put clothes back on. Stay ready for round two, he said, drunk and drowsy, throwing his arm over her and pulling her close. But she has never liked being naked in bed with a man after sleeping with him. She wonders now and again about Officer Brody's wife and how she sleeps next to her husband. Bet she sleeps just fine, Simone's father said one day. That woman don't give a shit. And I guarantee that bastard husband of hers don't either. Her father is right. Simone knows better than to assume the virtue of white women. Her father made sure she and Marcus read the right histories. Her mother made sure she used her eyes, though they, along with everything else, can be taken away from you. Regardless of what her father says, she can't help imagining it, the appalling intimacy of sharing a bed with a man like that, with a body that has shown the horrible cruelty it is capable of when awake. Kelvin is the man in Simone's bed, but she has him saved in her phone and in her mind as Bamboo, which is the name of a Jamaican owned bar in Flatbush. He approached her there while she was out with her best friend, during a time when going out with a friend still felt possible. Might as well get you some bamboo, Dana said that night, with a burst of her high, teasing laughter. Whenever Simone decides to send a text message and invite him over, she says the same words to herself. Might as well get you some bamboo. He's currently her favorite among her men, but now if it's time for anything, it's time for him to go. When she shakes him, he mutters something about watching cartoons, as if he's a little boy. She decides again that he's still her favorite and keeps shaking him until he wakes. He leaves without a fuss, and then Simone tidies the apartment, but only a little. As on other days, she feels quickly exhausted and decides she's done enough. She remains on the sofa for a while, her head still throbbing. The throw pillows smell like bamboo, like the viscous body oil he uses on his skin, the old school sweetness of Egyptian musk. Marcus used to sleep on the sofa all the time, crashing there after he and Simone spent those sublime evenings together, talking and drinking, watching movies, or listening to music. He joked that she paid too much rent, which was true, but he also said he felt at peace here, that her apartment was his sanctuary. On a day like this, maybe Officer Brody's wife takes her time making breakfast for her husband and their young children. He isn't the kind of man who cooks. The smell of food rouses him from bed. He comes into the kitchen and presses himself against his wife's back, and she tells him to be careful, hot stove. And in response, his hand furtively caresses her thigh. Officer Brody loves his wife, and she loves him too, unconditionally. Simone knows this. Before storming out of criminal court with her parents, she stared at the wife, at her newly brown hair gathered into a bun, her modest glasses nearly an exact replica of her husband's. She observed the way the wife tearfully hugged Officer Brody, the purity of the expression on her face, not even a glimmer of doubt regarding her husband's honor. Or, if the wife ever doubted it, even if she doubted it a great deal, she didn't care. That's what her embrace of him said. I don't care what you might have done to that man and his family. I don't care about the story, the only story that makes sense. All that matters is this: your acquittal. You're coming home. Simone saw it that day in the courtroom, and she's seen it in the photographs she's looked at over and over since then. Other than the natural redness of the wife's hair, and the fact that she, like her husband, doesn't actually wear glasses, the photographs don't show anything different. Officer Brody's wife loves him. She loves his devotion to her family. It's easy for Simone to imagine him being a wonderful husband and father during that time. And maybe he still is now, however long later, playing the best man he has ever been in his life, committed to the role, identifying completely with the idea of his own innocence. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Jamel, thank you. That was very powerful. Hi, everybody, and thank you for watching. My name's Clifford Thompson. I thought I would read an essay that came out a couple of years ago. It seemed appropriate for this time, and this is called Jazz June. When I was 14 and nearing the end of 8th grade, I developed my first serious crush. The girl, named June, was in 9th grade and about to graduate from the junior high school we attended. Given where my crush ultimately got me, i.e. nowhere, June's impending departure, a source of grief for me at the time, was unimportant. June herself, actually, was unimportant. I mean that as a comment not on her worth as a person, but on her being the object of my affection, which seems, when I think back on it, almost completely arbitrary. I was of an age and inclination to make one person the center of my can't sleep at night, can't focus on my homework longing. Along came June, hardly gorgeous, but pretty enough, nice if not preternaturally sweet. She fit the bill. I had all I needed to be miserable, which I quickly became, not admitting to myself, possibly not even understanding, that my crush was its own point. June played the violin. I never heard any of her performances myself, but I heard a lot about them. My friend Big Darrell Greenfield, also a 9th grader, said about a musical number June played at their graduation, "I don't usually like the violin, but she was tearing it up." I borrowed Darrell's yearbook so that, I didn't tell him this, I could gaze upon and occasionally kiss June's picture, which showed her smiling in her graduation cap. June was part of a group of musical friends to which I was connected tangentially. To have a stronger tie to those superior beings, I signed up that spring of 1977 for summer clarinet lessons with the DC Youth Orchestra program, not to be confused with the actual DC Youth Orchestra, the program's elite, of whom June was one. The program had 3 levels of bands and orchestras, and I got the unspoken message that the orchestras, with their stringed instruments, were considered more important. While I spent that typically sweltering DC summer riding 2 buses to my lessons, squawking and squeaking through quarter and eighth notes, June went away to music camp, adding physical distance to the other forms of distance separating us. And as I waited that summer for the promised postcard from her, which never arrived, June, and by association the violin, came to represent for me an unobtainable ideal. June itself, not the girl but the month, has something about it of the unattainable, the unfulfilled promise. That is paradoxically because June, at least in the cities where I have spent my life, is the only reliably spring-like month. Spring officially arrives in late March, finding a lot of people still wearing their winter coats. April and even early May sometimes carry a chill. But in June, we can venture outside where green leaves and flowers are, contending neither with the cold nor with the heat of that long march from Independence Day to Labor Day, that season of commuting in sweat-dampened shirt collars over gradually shortening days. June brings freedom in those wonderful extra hours of sunlight. June whispers that anything is possible, and therein lies the ache. As its days fly by, it is in the end just another month, and one of the shorter months at that. We may feel a vague regret over what we have yet again failed to achieve, a hint of sadness for what was promised but not delivered. There is an answer for this, one that has something in common with my long ago crush on the girl June. A focus on the feeling itself rather than on where it might lead. In my adopted home, New York City, one way that I revel in the feeling of June, of spring, is to walk across the Brooklyn Bridge, particularly at night when the Manhattan skyline is lit, each of the many brightened windows and the silhouettes of those tall, tall buildings suggesting industry, energy, creativity. The sense of possibility this inspires, the belief that we can do, that we can at least try, may lead somewhere, but it is also a wonderful thing all by itself. Among her many other poems, the African-American writer Gwendolyn Brooks wrote the following, perhaps her most famous work. We real cool. We real cool. We left school. We lurk late. We strike straight. We sing sin. We thin gin. We jazz June. We die soon. The poem adopts the viewpoint of marginalized Black boys who shoot pool together. Brooks explained about the passage We Jazz June that these boys, effectively locked out of mainstream society, gleefully attack its cherished symbols. To June, that month of wedding announcements and newspaper society pages, the boys bring jazz, originally the music of the lowdown. Jazz was once a verb, synonymous with fuck. I may have read that explanation in a textbook, but it's possible, and this is the version of events I prefer, that I heard it from Brooks's own lips on the one cringe-worthy occasion when I met her. This was in New York in 1991. I was a freelance, read, and unemployed writer of 28, scrounging for a living, and I had signed on to write a young adult biography of Brooks. In 99 cases out of 100, such books are cobbled together with information from secondary sources. But I saw in the newspaper that Brooks was giving a reading in Manhattan, and so I went, hoping to infuse my project with insights that only the poet herself could provide. To my delight, one of the poems she read that night was We Real Cool. After the reading, while Brooks greeted friends and signed books, I lurked late, waiting for my chance to speak to her. Finally, noticing this silent young stranger, she turned to me, curious. I explained what I was doing, and she asked what she could do for me. And then, God help me, I said to this Pulitzer Prize-winning septuagenarian, I was hoping I could buy you a cup of something. I should say here, to portray Brooks in an appropriately positive light and make myself look like less of a fool, that she later personally mailed me materials that she thought would help my project. One of them is the book signed by Brooks from which I just copied her poem. In that moment, though, maybe misinterpreting my offer, or possibly worse, understanding it perfectly, she bent double with laughter, long, loud laughter of embarrassment for me, for us. It's probably superfluous to report that I bought the poet no cups of anything, that night or ever. As she laughed, I felt sorry I had said what I did, sorry I'd come at all to see this woman, who seemed to have about as much use for me as did my old schoolmate June. We jazz June. I have another way of observing and celebrating June. I listened to the late Jackie Byard's solo piano jazz record Blues for Smoke, recorded in 1960. Whatever the reason, and it may well be purely subjective, the tunes on Blues for Smoke, none more so than Spanish Tinge #1, make me think of soft June nights, of walking slowly, perhaps aimlessly, through dark streets lined with trees that are thick with leaves, the yellow glow of the occasional street lamp illuminating just enough green foliage to hint at its black depths. There's also the 6-minute title track of Sonny Rollins' album The Bridge from 1962. Prior to making that album, Rollins, a young Turk of the tenor saxophone, had found himself being praised by jazz critics, even as he sometimes failed to play as well as he wanted. To bring himself closer to what he felt he could do, to pursue what he hoped was possible, Rollins stopped performing and recording for a time and took to practicing his horn on the Brooklyn Bridge before settling on the Williamsburg Bridge. The Bridge, a nod to those days and nights of dogged self-improvement, features contrasts. Rollins plays in a rapid tempo that occasionally slows, possibly reflecting the ebb and flow of traffic on the bridge. And while he often races up and down chords, seemingly playing every note in existence, he sometimes plays impressionistically, blowing isolated 2- or 4-note phrases, dabs of sound, bringing to mind the pinpoints of light from office windows of the Manhattan skyline. Rollins's practice sessions were not recorded. Still, sometimes during those June walks over the bridge, I think of those no doubt beautiful sounds, those expressions of feeling played not long before my birth and heard mainly by Rollins himself. I am happy to be where that music was made, even if it can't be heard, even if, in the traditional sense, it got nowhere. I own a clarinet. It was given to me years ago by a friend who found it in the apartment she had just moved into and remembered that I had once played. I don't play anymore. Truth is, I was never very good. There are a number of possible explanations for that. An obvious one, which I don't discount, is simple lack of talent, but an important one may be that I didn't have a model. At age 14, I didn't know from jazz and wouldn't for years, and so I was without a sense of what was possible on the instrument. That is not a real regret. I am more than content today to be a fan and to subject my wife and daughters to this fandom. They are good-natured about it. On a recent chilly autumn day, I pulled out one of my oldest jazz CDs, a compilation of the work of the alto saxophonist Julian Cannonball Adderley, and played it for my teenage younger daughter. I have long maintained that the late Cannonball possessed the sweetest sound in all of jazz. I drew my daughter's attention in particular to a ballad called Spring Is Here, a work my wife once pronounced to be too beautiful. As we listened to that indeed almost inexpressibly lovely tune, I realized something that I hadn't during the innumerable times I had played this record before, and I said to my daughter about Cannonball's delicate, quivering tone, he made his horn sound like a violin. And even as outside the fall wind stirred brown leaves and deposited them in piles on the wide sidewalks of our Brooklyn neighborhood, I thought for just a moment, hearing that sweet jazz of June. Thank you so much.
Okay, boom. Hey, y'all. Thank you, Clifford, for Cliff and Jamel for those readings. That was wonderful. All right. Hi, I'm Danez. It's good to see y'all. This is Cocoa Butter. I know it looks like I'm hot, but I'm just greasy. It's a difference. Okay, I'm going to read a poem by one of my god poets, Miss Evie Shockley, today. I love this poem so much. I got it tattooed on my side. If you paid me $5, I'll show it to you. All right. And I'm thinking about this poem today because, it's Juneteenth. Congratulations to all of you who knew what Juneteenth was before today, because they were really wilding out here. I was in the car dealership getting my oil change, and they was watching Good Morning America. And this woman was like, I didn't have a big mama to tell me about Juneteenth. And I was like, oh, no. The white woman is saying Big Mama on Juneteenth on CBS. We have gone a step too far into the revolution at this point, and I believe Gil was correct when he said that it should not have been televised. So all right, but today I'm Black, and I'm happy, and I'm proud to be Black. And this is Evie Shockley's poem, Ode to My Blackness. You are my shelter from the storm and the storm, my anchor and the troubled sea. Nights cast you warm and glittering upon my shoulders. Some would say you give off no heat. Some folks can't see beyond the closest star. You are the tunnel John Henry died to carve. I see the light at the end of you, the beginning. I dig down deep, and there you are at the root of my blues. You are thick. You are all thick and dark, enveloping the roots of my blues. Seems like it's too hard to let you go when I got nothing to lose. Without you, I would just be a shadow. Oh, sorry, I messed that up. Without you, I would be just a self of my former shadow. Word. That is Evie Shockley, Ode to My Blackness. I love her. Okay, cool. 2 more poems, and then we get to the talking. Let's see. It's Juneteenth, so let's read something kind of Black. Okay. So if any of you were born in the 90s, then you knew real R&B. Tiana Taylor has a new album out today. It's real R&B. Or was out the other day. It's so good, y'all. And Tiana Taylor like does like a lot of odes to like, 90s folks. She's got all the samples all through her album. And so I'm gonna do this poem, which has nothing to do with Juneteenth, and it has everything to do with just being free. It's just being yourself sometimes. So this is me doing my best Toni Braxton or Tamia. It's called Self-Portrait as a 90s R&B video. Lately, I've been opening doors in slow motion and find myself wearing loose white silks in rooms packed with wind machines and dusk. I have a tendency to be sad near windows, thinking of all the problems I have with my man, with his trifling yellow ass. My man is more a concept than anything. At dinner, I watch red pepper soup spill onto his powder blue button down and ask, why don't you love me anymore? I sit on the couch with a wine glass full of milk, cry in ways that frame me gorgeous and fuckable. My girls come over. We light his suits to spark our spliffs. My best bitch says I need to get over him, say that he don't even exist, but what she know? I got all this house to walk through, all these gowns to cry on, all these windows to watch the rain through. There must be a man in this house who loves me too much to do it well. There's a room in my basement filled with water and gold, and that's it. Water up to my well-managed waist, gold link chains that wrap around my ankles like a boa constrictor, or the hands of a man around a neck he used to love to bite. I dip my head in, let even my hair get wet, and rise out the water. Hood, Venus, Aphrodite, ghetto god with iced out ropes draped from my head and arms, covering my nipples in il na just so I could be a trophy for an award show only niggas know. Every rapper's favorite ex. 1996, given a body and he don't want this. I walk into my foyer because I have a foyer and say, who is she, nigga? I promise the hydrangeas flinch. My man so fake he don't exist. My girls was right. The suits we burned were mine. My man is all in my head, and it's a bad head. Tomorrow, after I run and spend some time studying the mirror, I'll burn this whole shit down like Left Eye would, like any good wife. Whatever survives will be my kingdom. I hope I make it. Boom. Okay. That was me acting like I thought on Juneteenth my mother would be embarrassed. All right, cool. And then this is the last poem. I'm just gonna read a little short one. It's the last one from my last book, Don't Call Dead. Black people, we are like always going through some stuff, and our poems and our things are always relevant. I'm like, it feels like a special Pride Month, a special Juneteenth, a special everything. And so I just want to say I'm grateful for all the Black people in the room tonight. Holla at y'all. I love you. And sometimes we fight, and sometimes we live a little bit of the dream, and sometimes it's all those things living at once. And I love you. And here's my last poem. Okay, cool. Dream where every Black person is standing by the ocean. And we say to her, what have you done with our kin you swallowed? And she says, that was ages ago. You've drunk them by now, and we don't understand. And then one woman, skin dark as all of us, walks to the water's lip, shouts, Emmett! Spits. And surely a boy begins crawling his way to shore. Thank you. All right. So Jamel and Cliff, come on back, and then we're going to do a Q&A. And if y'all have questions, feel free to ask them down below, and we'll get to them.
So, hey everyone, this is Keisha again. I'm going to stay off screen so that we can see the beautiful faces in front of us. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Jamel, Cliff, and Danez. We're going to open it up for Q&A. But before we do that, I want to do a few shout outs. First shout out is to Marita Golden, who's the co-founder, one of the co-founders with Clyde McElvain of the Hurston Wright Foundation. Y'all show Marita some love in the chat box. She's here. Say hello to her. 30 years ago, speaking of honoring our elders and honoring visionaries in our community, 30 years ago, she and Clyde had a vision. Started off with about $700 and started this foundation. And here we are entering the third decade, the 30th anniversary. So thank you, Marita. And then I just want to raise up a few other words while y'all go to the ask a question section. I want to shout out Stephanie for the joy and blessing she gave us, Melanie for voice, sound, and story, and then also Michael Julius for bringing out strength and determination. So, all right, y'all ready for some Q&A?
Yeah.
Okay. So, one of the things I would actually like to start with is actually just a question around about yourself. We have a question here about from Micah, which asks, writing with your intersectional identities, how do you truly incorporate all parts of yourself into your work without feeling like you have to choose?
Mm. Well,
I think a big part of it for me is knowing that if you just trust your compass, you will show up in whatever piece you're writing, in whatever way you need to be. And that every piece does not have to have the burden of being like the totality of your work, right? And so it's okay if I'm writing something and it requires me to access or to like even just question or view something from a certain vantage point that I have, right? And like I used to maybe have shame, like, oh, like was I not like gay enough in the Black thing? Was I not queer enough in this, you know, and other thing, you know, whatever. And there was this pressure to like say everything every time I spoke or wrote. And I think really just like recognizing that the piece's job is to only say what you were equipped and in the place to say at the time, and that it doesn't have to have the pressure to like say everything about you or to say everything about the work at once. So that for me alleviates some of that pressure of like, how do I always be 100% myself? That's by being honest, and that's it, you know. And I don't have to like perform the self in these other ways or like mark the self in these other ways throughout every piece that
Yeah. I would say too, it's sometimes interesting. I mean, depending on who you feel your different selves are, to have a dialogue between between those different selves. Have them in conversation. See what tension develops from there. That can yield some interesting things.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, for me, like when I'm writing fiction, the most important thing to me is character. Like my characters, who are they? And when I think really hard about character and ask questions about those characters, then every character is that mesh of identity categories. So I really think a lot about that, and I like your point, Cliff, about like sort of the different parts of yourself talking to each other. Because one thing I think about is like, to truly get to know your character in all their complexity. There's almost a way in which you ask yourself, and one of my writing teachers told me this, like who when they're alone, like late at night, just thinking thoughts, who are they talking to? And what are they thinking? And what's their language? What language do they use? And I think if you follow those kinds of questions, you're going to get into that richness of all those categories.
Well, that's beautiful, y'all. When you're at home at night, what unheard languages are inside of you? Let's keep it pushing. There's a question here about how do you go about connecting to the larger writing community, and have you found a writing community that connects to and or supports your Blackness, your queerness, your other identities within this mostly white literary space?
Mm. Well, this is a good one. uh,
I would say definitely. I don't know. I just go to where the Black people are, wherever. And I know that's not easy for everybody, right? It really depends on where you're at. You know, I think the best thing to start anything is locally. And so, you know, it really might depend on what city you live in. And right, we're in the middle of Corona too, so this is like a complicated answer, right? To say like look at the local writing groups and like go to the open mics and like find the book clubs or whatever, like find where writers tend to be at and go there. And you know, find writers and readers around you. And in some cities, you know, that can be easier to find where those, you know, Black or brown or, you know, folks might be. And there's also, you know, the beauty of online. There's a lot of, you know, things happening on the Facebooks and all that kind of stuff. There's stuff like the Hurston Wright Foundation and this whole weekend, which is Black writers coming together to meet each other. And you really hold on to those things, right? Like, to me, sure, writing doesn't necessarily work in the same way of like networking or like, you know, like LinkedIn, you know, isn't really a thing I would like say like works in the writing world. Maybe, but like, you know, I think it's important to like know each other and like nourish each other. But I think that nourishing is really part of it, right? So like not just meeting writers, but really like growing in partnership and community with writers. What has really nourished me has not been knowing a crap ton of writers, but has been having a circle of folks that were really there for each other's work, right? To like provide feedback and just really like love on each other, like have like compatriots and like, you know, people to commiserate with and co-celebrate with throughout this work. And I think, you know, that can also just be like having like a couple good folks. You know, it doesn't have to be this expansive view. If you get you a couple good folks that you can call your writing friends and like you respect their words and y'all are there for each other, then that's it.
Yeah. I want to echo that, and I also want to emphasize the online piece. You know, like Black writing is a living thing. You know, and a lot of your favorite writers are online. You know, so you can sort of tap into the conversations that are happening on Black Twitter. And in addition to that, you know, don't think you have to reinvent the wheel. Like there are places where you can go. The first real workshop I took was through Callaloo. You know, I work with Matt Johnson and Nelly Rosario there. And there are other places. Kimbilio has been a resource for me to build community. Hurston Wright. So, you know, look for what's out there, and also take advantage of what's easily available to you online.
Yeah. I would add, I mean, it can be, I think, hard for Black writers to find each other in this, you know, in this literary culture. I find, you know, years ago, I would write to Black writers I admired, and I found that more often than not, they were responsive to me and very helpful to me, and that can, you know, they can point you in different directions, and you know, that can really help foster a sense of community. And I mean, one thing I've always admired about is like Black people in general is that like in any field of endeavor, if there's only one of us, there's going to be one, right? In pretty much any field you name, and like anywhere you go, you know, in any writing situation you find yourself in, there will be somebody else, you know, there'll be somebody else who looks like you. So, yeah.
Thank y'all. One of the things, first of all, thanks for the shout out to Hurston Wright. And actually, there's several Hurston Wright writers on this live tonight with us. There's over 270 or so of you in this room. Hurston Wright writers, please drop in the chat box other resources you use to work on your craft, to expand your craft, some competitions that you've applied to. And then I also give a shout out to our writing workshops. Writers Weekend and also Writers Week in August is already filled up. But we're hopeful to be able to extend some of our micro classes and other virtual offerings so that folks can tap into our work from wherever you are in the world. All right. So listen, I have a question about love, y'all. And I think this question comes from Latoya. And I think this is a really interesting and apt question because really in all of your readings, I actually think you were talking about love. Whether it was through aggression, whether it was through very descriptive personal relationships, those things are love drawing boundaries. I got that from my friend at Rasha at Split This Rock. So here's Latoya's question. Many of you have talked of love and romance. What say you of Black love and romance in these times?
I date a white, so I feel like I gotta sit this one out.
Well, I'll say something. I'll say something.
You can still come to the cookout, Danez.
Like the last one, I promise.
That's a great question, and I was just thinking about it in relation to the part of the story that I read. And one thing I realized, and maybe I already kind of knew it, but it's become more explicit now, is that Simone, my character, the love of her life is her brother. The love of her life isn't someone that she's sleeping with. It's not somebody that she's dating. And she has pleasure and that's in her life, but the love of her life is her brother. And the reason I want to say that is because I think in this time and in any time, like, notions of Black love are so robust and so expansive that we can talk about love in all these ways. Too often love gets diminished into who are you dating, who are you going to end up in bed with, when really it's more than that. It is that, but it's more than that. And so I would just think in this time about how robust Black love is, and how the love or loves of your life can be your brother or your sister or your cousin or your auntie or whoever it is, your grandma. And that seems really important, just to think about those kinds of connections.
Yeah, I would echo that. It's interesting. I mean, in a time like this, with everything going on, it can have the effect of just making you understand what is important to you, and I think my family, my original family, my siblings, and the family I raised, my daughters are pretty much grown now, but we've been in more, in greater touch, like electronically, even though we're not seeing each other in person. And my sister sent out like this Juneteenth message to everybody in the family, and my daughter, who's not with me now, but she wrote back and said, I just feel so lucky to have grown up in this family that has such an emphasis on love and thinking about justice, and so I think in these times that it's just like you were just saying, Jamel. I think the love thing goes beyond like romantic love into familial and all kinds of love, and and in a time like this, you almost don't have to think about it, because you just feel naturally those relationships I think are just naturally strengthened in times of adversity like this. So.
Word. Yeah. I think Black people are some of the best lovers on earth, right? And just how we love each other, and that part too. But just how we love on each other, like y'all were saying.
Yeah.
I think also it's a good opportunity to love hard and demand more of our love from each other, right? I'm thinking about specifically like how we love women in the Black community, how we love trans folks, queer folks, disabled folks, right? Like folks who, who are something else and Black. I think we're the stars are like real weird right now, right? And I think it's a good time for reckoning. And so I think it's a good time to while we are like in the spirit of definitely coming together real hard, right? Like I've seen in Minneapolis how Black people have shown up for each other in some real big ways in these last weeks and these months. And Also, like, you know, have a hard talk with your cousin about why he needs to stop using the F word. And not that F word, but the other F word about your other cousin. You know, and also like we really go have a tough conversation about why don't nobody leave kids with Uncle Ronnie. And maybe Uncle Ronnie don't need to be Uncle Ronnie no more around here. So let's, you know, like extend that love into like cleaning house too, right? And like demanding more of like how we expand and extend Black love to each other.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank y'all for those reflections. And speaking of love, I just want to give a shout out to my neighbors here in Southeast DC for the love they show in terms of just keeping space, holding space. I leave my garage open all the time. My neighbors look out for me. And people think Southeast DC, for y'all who don't know, is historically Black community east of the river in DC. And people have so many things to say about this space, but it's one of the most beautiful places that I've ever lived. And I lived in every quadrant in DC. So shout out to my neighborly love. Let me go to the top because I think people are going to start get upset with me because there's quite a few votes for this question. Okay, wait, it's changed. Okay, what or whom would you credit as your biggest influence?
Wow. Wow. Good gracious. I'll just jump in real fast. I was, you know, I started writing prose when I was about 18, but I started doing drawing cartoons when I was about 7, you know, and sometimes I date my writing from that because, you know, because I had to write the cartoons. So I think there's a kind of an evolution of like influences. You know, I was really into comics. I was into Peanuts, then I was into Marvel comics, then I started reading prose fiction. You know, I read The Catcher in the Rye. Then I discovered James Baldwin's work, and then I discovered Albert Murray's work, and all of those people, as different as they sound, really kind of all had their impact on the kinds of things that I try to create. Yeah, so a diversity of things.
Yeah, it's hard to narrow it down to one. You know, when I was a teenager, I would read Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison over and over again. Like I would get to the end of it and then just go back to the beginning and start reading it again. And my mom thought something was wrong with me, so I was still reading that book. But Ellison was a really early influence for me. Baldwin, you know, who Cliff mentioned. I love Gail Jones, Toni Morrison, of course. But beyond like the many Black writers, you know, in all genres, but just Black art in general, you know, like the story I read from, like one of the things I had in my mind when I was writing it was Cranes in the Sky by Solange. You know what I mean? I have a story in my collection that was inspired by, partially the images were inspired by Killer of Sheep by Charles Burnett, you know, the filmmaker. So just, you know, I think like whatever makes you ask questions, whatever energizes you, it may not show up in your work. Like people may not be like, aha, that's your influence because their stamp is in your words. But anything that makes you want to put pen to page is an influence, you know? So I want to answer that question as sort of broadly as possible because, you know, there's so much amazing art, Black art that I find inspiring and influential.
So I got nothing to say. That's good.
All right. Fair enough, Danez.
Can I jump in again if you don't have anything to say?
Yeah, go for it.
It's funny. People used to ask me. Yeah, my kids are in their 20s now, and people used to ask me, "How can you be a writer and also have a family?" And I say, well, I don't know what kind of writer I'd be if I didn't have a family, because like being a father has given me such an appreciation of just like the preciousness and the fragility and the specialness of life that I don't think I had before I became a father. So I would count that among my influences. So.
Thank you, Cliff. And also, we raise up all of our fathers. This weekend is actually Father's Day weekend. And I know that's a special time for many of us. And sometimes it can be painful, it can be loving, it can be challenging, but it's still an opportunity for us to tap into our emotions and our joy. Let's go to the next question. Where, when, and how often do you write? How has that changed considering recent times?
I think it's gotta like that's a question that I think is one that you have. For me, I find peace in just having throughout the seasons, even if I answer it in very different ways. When sometimes in my life I've written every day, and then that couldn't be further from the truth now. Most of the time it happens at home. When I really like it or prefer it, it either happens in my notes app or by paper, unless it's a longer thing. And it just happens so much. I think the same energy that it takes to write is the same energy that it takes to pay the bills or just to keep yourself steady or to help keep somebody else steady sometimes. And so I think just having the question, I think is all the discipline I know how to ask for myself as a writer, and not get into too prescriptive of an answer for that, right? Because I used to be able to say, you got to write every day. And then sometimes it's actually you can't, sometimes that's crazy. And that's a nice thing for you. Yeah. But over here, we're gonna need to write once a month, and we're real happy about it, or we're gonna need to write the seasons, and we're gonna be happy for that week that we got a lot of poems out, and we'll see you in the fall. And as long as you are answering that question abundantly and with a rigor to yourself, right? Or even just being tender to yourself, right? Because sometimes you just got to go out there and be a part of the world and life and fill up that. Before you can really sit down to do it. So I think that is to say that it has looked a lot of different ways. And when it shows up and when I feel like it's time to write, I try as much as possible to see what I can clear space out of my life to really make time to sit down and be attentive to that muse when she shows up in a real powerful way. Otherwise, I'm trying to engage with writing at some point every day, whether that's reading or writing. I think reading is part of that practice too of being a writer. And that's all I can ask for myself is that I'm touching it every day. Even when it's not my work, then that means I'm just taking it in, listening to stuff, watching stuff, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm just flagging. We have about 4 minutes left, guys. So I'm thinking we'll finish this question and maybe ask 2 more. But I'll ask if you can give your abbreviated versions of those questions.
My bad.
Okay. Well, try your best.
I was just going to say real quick. I agree with what Danez was saying. I find though that a routine, it as much as you can develop a routine, it's very helpful. If you have half an hour, 45 minutes every day, if you can do that, even think of it as a job, right? Sometimes you show up at the job and nothing happens. Sometimes you show up and it's very exciting, but you're there, whatever happens, right? Maybe you don't write a word, but you're thinking, and that generates something. So.
Yeah, just real quick, I totally agree. You got to find that balance between getting the work done and being gentle with yourself. Danez was totally on point. One of my writing buddies, the poet Soma Sharif, she shared with me one day that, sometimes she just sets a timer for 15 minutes. And you do what you do in 15 minutes, and sometimes 15 minutes passes and all you've done is think about your writing. That's writing. That counts. So just broadening that definition, while still being true to what you want to accomplish.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for that. There's one question. I'll ask 2 more questions. This is the second to the last question, and it has at this time the most votes. How have you handled the balance or lack thereof between writing about Black pain and Black joy in these times?
Ooh.
Y'all can take a little bit more time with this one.
Well, I think that's where our art sits. That's where it sits. I was reading real quick. I was reading some of the reflections on Juneteenth this morning by like folks like Jelani Cobb and Jamel Bowie and Annette Gordon Reed, and like Juneteenth, just that day in Texas. That is like an ambivalent space, like coming in to announce an emancipation that happened 2.5 years ago, and it's still happening in Texas, and in some parts of Texas continues to happen. And we know that is, the legacy of that is continuing now. Like we sit in the space of that pain and joy. Like we are the people who transform pain into joy. We transform pain into jokes. So I just think that's where we sit, and that's why like so much of Black art is so powerful.
Yeah. I think an honest expression will probably include all of an honest expression of what you're going through and feeling will probably include all of that just by definition, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you just use your own compass, say what's real. Make sure you say it in the right space. I don't know. I was going through like some old books today, like my old joints, and I was just like, oh, why'd you say that? Yeah. And I also came with like, recognizing the tenderness towards the younger self and being like, okay, that's what you knew how to say at the time. And I don't know. I think like you say what feels urgent and kind and true where necessary, or urgent and sort of like rupturing where necessary, like when you feel it. You say what feels like you need to be said. You can always edit. That's the blessing of being a writer. You can always edit. And also, don't write something if it feels like it's if it's messing you up and you're messing it up. You're messing it up. Stop. Be kind to yourself. Don't force yourself to dive into too painful a place where you know the way to do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a beautiful sentiment. Be kind, be generous, be graceful, and gracious with yourselves. All right, y'all. Last question. And I will ask you to share anything that you would like to share with with our participants who are all from all around the world tonight, actually. And one of my favorite questions, in addition to that, share whatever you would like to share. One of the questions you could use is, if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing I would like for you to ask, this is one of my favorite questions from Writers Week 2019. So shout out to my Writers Week folks from last year. What song must be played at the cookout? All right. So if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be? And what song must be played at the cookout? By the way, we're going to add this to our weekend playlist, so as well.
Man.
Well, I think I'm the oldest person on screen here, so that accounts for my answer, which is Jungle Boogie, right?
I'm gonna say my song is gonna be what's my boy? Oh, my girl. Tevin Campbell, Can We Talk? There we go. And what would I say to my younger writing self? Take your time, like Lord Jesus, you are in a whole bunch of hurry to do what? The good stuff takes longer to cook. So take your time. And be greedy with it, actually. Let's see. And that's it. Yes. Yes. So can we talk for a minute?
Well, all right. So I'm a 90s, early 2000s like hip hop head. So I would say You Got Me by The Roots and Erykah Badu. And advice from my younger self, I would just say read as widely as you can. The Black literary tradition is so varied, so just read everything, read all of it. We're doing everything.
Yeah. I would say take criticism. Don't take criticism of your work personally. Just learn from it what you can. Just take it as fuel for getting better. Don't be thin-skinned about it. Yeah.
And run towards the people who say the stuff that it stings a little bit too true. Don't just stay around the folks that give you all the honey.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Be weary of your so great. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But listen, we like honey, Danez. We like honey, though.
We love the honey. We love the honey, but sometimes, you know, honey and a little bit of sting. You need a little bit of that sting.
Mhm.
We do. So listen, y'all, we're gonna make the ancestors proud and only end a little bit late. So, so listen, I want to thank all of you from wherever you are in the world. Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for spending Juneteenth with us. This is my invitation again to you. If you really enjoyed what all of these beautiful humans shared tonight, please buy their books and support Mahogany Books. You can click the green button there. If you want to learn more about the foundation, you want to sign up for a micro class, which is a short version of a workshop, only 60 minutes and only $10. Go to the Hurston Wright link just above our faces and you'll see the upcoming micro classes. And other than that, really, I say thank you, Cliff. Thank you, Jamel. Thank you, Danez. And thank all of you for bringing your beautiful energy, your wonderful questions. Have a beautiful weekend. Stay strong, y'all. We'll be all right. And we'll do all of this in solidarity. Good night, y'all.
Thanks, Keisha. Good night.
Thank
Good night.
you. Good night. And if you're still here, please go to our website, www.hurstonwright.org, learn more about our programs, and also consider making a donation. Thank y'all.
Get off there. Oop.
I got you, Cliff. Don't worry.